make sure that we're live because sometimes it lies.
Yeah, that's all good. Take your time.
All right.
I don't got any plans for after the show today, too. So if we run a little bit late, is that okay or not?
Yeah, that's fine.
All good. Take your time.
I'm always down with the talk. Sorry, I've got background.
Yeah, I just heard a bit of an echo there. Was that from mine or yours?
No, that was me.
Oh,
I
okay,
just
cool.
muted my system volume.
Sure.
It looks like I'm live. All right, that's the thing. We are an agent of education, my friends. So today's lecture, I don't mind.
Cool.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Excuse my voice here today. I've been under the weather, not feeling very well, but the show must go on regardless. So here I am. You might hear yourself again, myself. Regardless. So I will begin the show here.
Sounds good.
Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us here this beautiful Sunday afternoon on Watchers Talk. My name is Omar, and I'm your host, coming to you from the West Coast, Canada, Vancouver, BC. And today I have a fellow Canuck on with me from the East Coast, from Ontario, Canada. But before we get into that, we'll do a quick introduction and talk a little bit before we jump into the show. You guys remember we have a petition going on that we need 1 million signatures for. You guys have done a wonderful job so far by getting the word out, and people are signing up. The numbers are going up, so that's great to see. So let's keep up the good work, and I will pin the comment in our comments section and share that on your timeline, groups, and such, and encourage others to go and sign that petition and help us save the standing stones of Australia and of the world. They're just not Australian, but they belong to everyone. So with that being said, on March 20th, we have a webinar coming up, the Econautical. We have 7 speakers going to start at 8 a.m. and finish at 10 p.m. 7 speakers, 2 hours each, hour and a half of presentation and 30 minutes of questions. Is going to be hosted by myself and my friend from Closer Encounters, Clarence Mitchell. Yay, everybody. If I had claps, I'd throw that up there. But anyways, you guys can tell that I'm feeling a little bit goofy here. I've been under the weather here for the last few days. That's why I really haven't been active on Facebook. And but today I'm feeling a little bit better. So I'll just keep going on. I'll just stop. Help me welcome my guest here this afternoon, Leland Jetson from Ontario, Canada. Hi, Leland. How are you, buds?
Hey, Omar. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries, brother. No worries. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, I hope you're feeling better soon. Glad you're able to tough through it because I've been looking forward to this show all week.
Oh yeah, thanks, buddy. No, I'm a trooper. The show's got to go on, right? So I'll keep on plowing through. So you're a researcher from Ontario, Canada. So and you have your own show too, the Magi Show. So you got a pretty good following of your own. So this must be a little bit different for you, being on the other side of the mic.
Yeah, it's a nice change. I actually do a radio show on CKWR 98.5 FM, so I get a couple shows going on, and then I do the writing for Adept Initiates.
Nice, buddy. Nice. So For those that don't know you, the people that follow Watchers Talk and may have not come across you before, why don't you tell us about yourself, and then from there we'll stroll right into our show.
Sure. Yeah, basically how I got started in this is I had a paranormal encounter with light beings when I was about 10 years old. And then they gave me a coin that had some ancient imagery on it. The coin itself isn't really old. It's only from 1964, but I've pretty much been on a lifelong obsession ever since, trying to decipher the ancient symbols that are on the coin and what these light beings are all about. So that's how I got started, and I pretty much started researching up north and had some pretty good luck finding some new material out there. So everything from King Solomon's gold mine to an Anubis amulet to even solving Atlantis.
Wow, that's pretty huge.
Yeah. No, it's like some days I'm always thinking that it's hard to believe that I've gotten this much accomplished and that some other people are going to have theories in Atlantis and prove it all wrong one day. But I still do my best. Like, who knows what the future holds, really, right?
So how long you've been actively full head into this investigation?
Well, I guess it started when I was about 10 years old, and I'm almost 40 now, so about 30 years or so.
That's insane. That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah.
So walk us through as to, because a lot of people are going to think King Solomon, and the first thing that comes to their mind is King Solomon from the Old Testament, and there's no mention of Canada or anything like that. People just think that it's just with Africa and the Middle East, perhaps a little bit further north, and then the Anubis amulet that's connected with Egypt. So how did that stuff end up in Canada? What led you to believe that's the origins of your findings?
I guess where to begin with it. Did you want to know about the Anubis amulet, you mean? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the Anubis amulet was actually discovered by one of my aunts, and it was in the ruins of an old house, basically the farmhouse that her family was moving into at the time. And she kept it to herself. Actually put it in a toy drawer, and our whole family played with it growing up, and never thought anything too special of it. And then after I started working with Adept Initiates, my aunt was like, hey, I found this Anubis amulet, or an amulet, a long time ago, basically about 50 years ago. And she never got to the bottom of what it was supposed to be. So she gave it to me to look at. And that's when I realized, well, after about a year of researching, that this was a good possibility. It's an Anubis amulet.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's no problem. I just heard a bit of an echo there.
Yeah, that's me. I was just sharing, and my volume came back.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, for the longest time, I didn't think there was anything to this Anubis amulet, that it was just like some sort of a replica made by someone. Like, you know how in the old days, in the 1800s, people are making fake relics and then trying to sell them or whatever?
Yeah.
So
a lot of that in Egypt.
Yeah, so that's what I was thinking, that this Anubis amulet had to be a fake. And then I started bringing it to different labs for tests and doing different research on it. And I got some slides ready to show you what the research found. So maybe the viewers want to decide whether or not they think it's a fake, but really no one knows for sure yet until the museum does the final tests on it.
So before we get into that, I just want to ask, you mentioned Adept Initiates a couple of times here.
Yeah.
Who and what is the Adept Initiates?
Yeah, Adept Initiates is like an esoteric group, sort of, that Next started, Next NEXD. I don't know if you've ever heard of his work before.
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, he does a lot of traveling around the world. He does tours in South America to the pyramid sites there, and he's done some videos in Egypt too. He used to work with John Anthony West a bit, but I guess sadly he's passed on now. Right? And then how I got associated with them is I used to really like writing a lot of comments on different ancient mystery research groups on Facebook. And then I started talking to Next in chat there, and he said that he was looking to get some people on the team to help do some writing for blogs. So I actually started writing these blogs even before I went up north. and had my discoveries.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now, you found what looks like Stonehenge, and a lot of people are now, thankfully, are becoming adept to the idea that Stonehenge is not only connected with Britain, but all over the world, because like we were talking earlier in my intro, the Stonehenge of Australia. So we have a Stonehenge here in Northern Ontario, which is as above as below the constellation Draco.
Yeah.
Right? Why don't you tell us about that a little bit, and then we'll cruise on into your presentation. I thought people should hear about that first, so that it kind of plants a seed as to what you're going to talk about leading into your presentation.
Yeah, makes sense. If you have an idea of what we're going to cover here. Okay. Yeah, basically, this Draco Stonehenge was originally written by a researcher, I don't know, about 20 years ago. And then there was a professor from one of the universities or colleges up north, I think it's Nipissing. And his name is Backroads Bill. And he did an amazing blog on the site showing like the stones up north and how they, 4 of the largest ones had a big alignment that took place on the equinox or the solstice, like how the sun rises and it lines up with the blocks. And the other thing that he wrote in there too is that the First Nations people have been using this place as a holy site for as far as the records go back. And their whole reasoning for doing so was that they thought that that area was a really special spot with like energy underneath the ground, so that these Stonehenge rocks were supposed to harness and collect the energy.
Is there a particular tribe that practices that there, or is it all of the neighboring tribes of that area?
Yeah, I've had one First Nations guest on the show, and I was talking to him about that to see like what like who was living in that area at the time, or has the different things that happened in Canada changed the location of different peoples around. But as far as it seems, it's the Ojibwe that were using it, or still are using it.
Do they have ceremonies on any equinoxes or solstices as such we got coming up on Tuesday?
Yeah, I really hope to find that out, because one of the times I was there, they came there for like a powwow or some type of ceremony, but I'm not sure what date that was. I'll have to check. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's one of the key days that they do it, because it seems like cultures all around the world follow the equinox and the solstices, right?
Yeah, yeah. Is the now King Solomon's mine?
Sure.
How is that all connected in with this Stonehenge? Is the mine in within this the grounds of this? Before I get into how big is this? Because I was looking on your website, and there's a lot of growth around the trees, and you used a drone to really take the image and define where these stones are. Now, how wide of an area does this site take up?
If you, I guess hard to describe it. Like there's a highway called Highway 11, and it goes from the border of Quebec all the way, or no, it's Highway 66, goes from the border of Quebec all the way over to Highway 11. And that whole stretch there, I'd say, is maybe about 30 kilometers or so. And that whole area is a hotspot for this stuff. Like there's the King Solomon's mine site in that area. There's some Bigfoot encounters. There's an abandoned military base that had some encounters with UFOs. There's the Draco Stonehenge and an offering table all along this one stretch of highway.
The offering table, what exactly is that?
It's kind of hard to describe. Like I don't know if
you said in our conversation earlier, you said there was a similar structure in Bulgaria.
Yeah, well, basically this offering table design isn't really just common to only Canada and Bulgaria, but it was used in Egypt. It was used in South America. Yeah, pretty much any ancient culture that was building megaliths, you're going to find one of these offering tables. And it's really ironic that they're almost all the same shape. And I guess we'll get into the slides later. It's also the same shape of Stonehenge.
Really?
Like the one in England.
I got a question here from Clarence Mitchell.
Cool.
Before we cruise into it, it's about your T-shirt.
Oh yeah.
Clarence says from Closer Encounters, I like the shirt. What are the symbols and what do they mean?
Yeah, this is actually some of my latest research. It's only about maybe a month old or so. It's like this symbol here in the center. That's actually the symbol that's been found inside of Bulgarian cave art. And it's weird that that symbol seemed to evolve over time into the winged disc, like the symbol that you see in Egypt or basically all over the world too. And then that winged disc symbol, it's like, man, there's so many connections to it as well. And I guess to Samaria, like the Mesopotamians.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that the ancient town that's next to this cave is also called Sumer. And the people living on Bulgaria don't know why it's called Sumer or what even it would mean. So it's like, I don't know, finding this symbol evolving into the winged disc next to a town called Sumer, it almost makes it seem like this is the evidence here about some of the areas that the Mesopotamians lived in expanded not only from Iraq to like Armenian stuff, but also in the other direction. So their empire was actually slightly bigger, I think, than we've given credit for. Right?
Yeah, I was just thinking that in your opinion, do you think that they were connected with the global civilization that we had in antiquity? Because out here in the West, I've discovered some anomalies that appear to be pyramids and mounds. And Julie Ryder in Montana has discovered, is working at active megalith sites. And so obviously, this whole thing is connected because we got pyramids being built in Mexico. So do you think all this information was being shared with all the tribes of North America? Like in order to like move these big, huge stones, it's going to take a little bit more than manpower and maybe some domesticated moose to move these megalith stones. So obviously there's technology involved there. So do you think that all of this was like the entire North American continent was connected like that?
Well, it's I kind of have two theories on it. Like I'm pretty sure that this culture that we're looking at, like the global culture, was called the religion was the Magi religion, the worshippers of the winged disc. And it's funny that winged disc seems to have a lot of shamanic connections to it. So people are often going to try to say that this technology or megalith construction method was shared just by people on boats and teaching everyone around the world. But I have a feeling like shamans can be anywhere in the world. And if they're getting this information from like another dimension from the Anunnaki, then it really wouldn't require boats to go around to every different location, right? Like shamans are going to reach the same Anunnaki gods regardless of what culture they are from or their location. So I think that's another possibility of how this seemingly connected culture managed to spread across the entire globe.
Very cool answer.
Thanks.
Yeah, very cool, man. Now, a lot of people, they don't give the natives up here in Canada the very much credence.
And, unfortunately.
And before the Europeans came and moved in here, they were pretty thriving and living off the land, causing no damage, and yet had the technology and the know-how, anyways, to work with megalith stone. Even if it's not carved, they still managed to articulate their views as above, so below. So now this Draco constellation, what's have you found out what's so important that's connected with the tribes like the Ojibwe and the Draco constellation?
Yeah, I haven't found the exact link yet, but I'm starting to get pretty close because I dug into the wiki archives on what is it called, Ojibwe cosmology.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have a cosmology picture on the website there, and it matches the exact like Sumerian version that you see where the two winged guys on either side like a central sacred tree. So it's like, man, the First Nations people really seem to have like either an ancient connection back to like Mesopotamia, or maybe it could be the shamanic connection here too. It's kind of hard to say. Yeah, I'm almost thinking maybe it's a little of both, really, because a lot of cases in life, it's usually never one or the other, but halfway in between, right?
Yeah, because in South America, they discovered a bowl that had Sanskrit writing on it. And we haven't discovered anything like that here in North America just quite yet. But common sense would say that if it was in South America, then there's pretty good chances that that type of evidence may be hidden here in North America. Like we have Kincaid's Cave in the Grand Canyon. They supposedly had Buddhas and Egyptian artifacts and mummies and all sorts of treasures, right? So there had to have been some sort of a global connection. It's like I was telling you just before the show began, is the anomaly of Ramses and the totem poles here in the West that I've seen so far. I found 4 or 5 now, where the totem pole, it's the man is holding on to a rod, and around his wrist there's some sort of a band, and we see the very same thing with Ramses, where Ramses is holding on to a rod in his hand, and he's also wearing a wristband that has some glyphs on it. Not really quite sure what they mean, but that rod is very prominent. So obviously we have a connection between the North American natives and Egypt, and then in your area we have King Solomon and Anubis connected with that. So there has to be a connection of some sort.
Yeah, well, I think we're really definitely getting to the bottom of it. Like the information that you can find out about these mysteries 10 years ago and compare it to now, it's like night and day, right? We're really getting down to the bottom of it.
Yeah. All right, let's jump into your slides here.
Sure. All right, I'll just bring up the slide here. No, basically how this all started, this is a picture of me with my grandparents. And you can probably tell here just by the photograph, I'll zoom in a little bit. But my grandma was actually a mystic from Ukraine, and she was pretty different than like your average person. Like you think she looks kind of funny in this picture, but she actually, almost every picture we have of her, she has this like same like mystic type expression to her. And it was really sad. She died young. And so pretty much right after, I guess, this picture was taken, she didn't live much longer. But I think that's a little bit where this whole story begins for me, is because I got the same gift that she had, that I'm able to dream and have different predictions based on those dreams that usually become pretty accurate. So that's basically where the whole mystery began, I guess, so to speak. And then I guess wasn't long after that my grandma passed that I was outside like sneaking out of the house with one of my friends. And when I was a kid, we had an encounter with light beings that sort of look like the picture behind me here. Mm-hmm. And these light beings were really incredible. And like, I don't know, some people think that it's great to see something like this, but it scared the crap out of me. I almost had a heart attack, couldn't move. But getting the coin that I got from them the next day, that's pretty much what triggered my investigations here.
They gave you that coin?
Yeah, it was strange how it worked out, because these light beings, they didn't give me the impression that they were able to talk. Like they didn't have features of like a defined mouth or anything. Mm-hmm. But they came right up close to us. And one of them stood like almost touching his forehead, or their forehead, to mine. But they didn't give me anything then, but it was like instantly night turned to daytime. And I had about a skip of about 5-6 hours where it seemed like 6 hours passed and I hadn't even blinked an eye. Mm-hmm. And then we managed to run away from that when it happened, but I came back the next day to look to see if there was any evidence left behind. And this coin was like right where we were standing. And I know most people around the world might think it's not too uncommon to find a Mexican coin in Canada, but really I haven't seen another one since. Like I haven't gotten any change or anything. Like geographically, we're pretty far from Mexico. So finding this coin here it's not like a common occurrence or anything, right?
Mm-hmm. All right, man.
No, it took me a lot of years. Like even just recently, the two symbols that we got on here, one is the ancient sacred tree symbol,
Uh-huh.
and this other one is one of the Aztec leaders that I guess he was the last person to be slaughtered by the Spanish. So I
And
got
that
a
coin is from 1961?
1964. Yeah, it's like a, what do they call it? A peso, maybe?
Yeah.
Or centavos. Yeah. No, I've never actually been to Mexico, so maybe one of these days this whole thing's going to lead me to go there. But I think pretty much right now I've deciphered the meaning of why the light beings gave me this coin and what both symbols mean and what mysteries they help solve. Yeah, and so then after I got that coin, it's like I spent my whole life watching like paranormal TV shows, reading everything I could about ghosts, trying to get to the bottom of what I could find out on the light beings. And I pretty much hit a dead end for quite a while. And then it wasn't until December 21st of 2012 when Scott Walter's show premiered. It's called America Unearthed. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one before.
Yeah, briefly. I don't really watch much TV.
Yeah, I haven't really since.
Yeah, I stay away from it. It's bad energy.
Yeah, no, I hear you there. Sports is pretty much all I watch these days now. But no, we got some pretty wild episodes that he put in his show, like talking about the Great Lakes copper heist, giants in Minnesota, a couple episodes on sacrifice, and even a Stonehenge in America. So after I watched this show, I was thinking, man, maybe this is why the light beings gave me the coin, is some of these ancient mysteries are being found all over America also. So I should really get off my butt and start looking for them. Yeah, and then it was on Scott's show that he showed that the Phoenicians were like one of the main culprits that people think that were here like in ancient times and doing all this stuff in America. And when I was checking the Phoenician tablets out, I happened to notice that this winged disc is on the top of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at this point in my investigation, it's like I didn't really know too much about the winged disc. So what I did is I went to the ROM Museum in Toronto, and I was fortunate enough they had the Mesopotamian exhibit happened to be in town. So then I decided to go there and check that out.
Bonus. How was that?
Well, that's when I found in a lot of the cuneiform tablets, they got the same winged disc symbol on a sacred tree. So then I started to look around different places around the world to see if I could find matching sacred trees. And I eventually found some in Africa, Europe, Asia, America, and India as well.
Now, in your opinion, is there's a lot of people that are split on this image, especially that center one.
Oh yeah, calling it a European symbol. No,
yeah,
the reason.
Some people have suggested, including myself, that that's technology and electricity that's being displayed there, and others say that it's the tree of life. Now, in your opinion, what do you think it is? Is it technology being displayed by the ancestors, or is it the tree of life, as most would say?
Well, when I started doing this, I eventually came across the words of Crazy Horse, one of the First Nations leaders, and he had a saying talking about how the sacred tree was going to come back one day and reunite like all of mankind in our darkest age to sort of bring us into the next age or whatever. Just to paraphrase, someone will have to look up his exact quote on that. But so that's what I started thinking, that this sacred tree symbol, I got to get to the bottom. Is it like technology, or is it just like a metaphor for something else? And then eventually I came across the Asian version. And this Asian version of the sacred tree is pretty much the biggest telltale sign of what this symbol actually is. And it turns out that this is a sword, a jewel at the bottom, and a mirror in the center. And the mirror in the center is, according to their legends, was used to gain wisdom. So it's like, it's almost, to me, I think the sacred tree is that ancient magi stargazing ritual. So I think...
and the looking mirror,
yeah,
that black granite mirror that they have in, I think, the British Museum.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's a British Museum, but I've heard something like that. So it could very well be it's technology of some sort.
Yeah, I think it's the key basically to access the Akashic records. Because I think if we can access the Akashic records, that's definitely going to unite mankind together, right?
Yeah, exactly.
No, and it was funny that comparing the different versions from each part of the world, it seemed like each one had like a little bit of a clue involved about solving what the sacred tree is. And you couldn't find all the clues in just one culture's version, but if you start putting all the pieces together, that's when it gets a lot easier to solve it. Yeah,
Now, I see the occult tree of the Magi.
Yeah.
Now, the Magi, why don't you give us a description on who the Magi are? Because the way I understand it, the word today, the magic,
it's the base of that word.
Comes from Magi, and it's also connected with the genie, and that grants you 3 wishes, and also with the jinn. So what is this occult tree of the Magi?
Yeah, basically who I think the Magi are, there's definitely a fair bit of opinions about that out there, but it's like, you know how the Anunnaki, a lot of people say that they didn't have a religion or that the religion was multiple things all over the place. Well, regardless of that, the priests of the ancient Anunnaki, they used to call themselves the Magi. And then the Zoroastrians today, they still call their priests Magi. And it's also found in the Bible, like the 3 Magi that came to visit Jesus. They were following a star. And I think this star technology is involved with the occult tree of the Magi, basically. It's like the Magi story from the Jesus' time. People are always like wondering, like, how could a star point the direction? But I don't think it's just basic as that. Like, if you're going to be stargazing, I think you can really access the Akashic records with that method. So it's not going to be like a lighthouse pointing the direction saying go that way. It's more of like they got the information and then they use that information to find his place, not just that. No, and then the Magi today have still taken a lot of heat. Like there's a lot of political crisis going on in Iran right now. Like the Magi religion and Islam doesn't really get along too well. So there's a lot of tension there. Similar, I guess, to what's going on with Palestine and Israel and all that. So there's definitely a lot of touchy subjects when it comes to researching the Magi. And maybe that's a little bit why people aren't talking about it as much yet.
Maybe it's because they're connected to the jinn.
Yeah.
And the jinn are interdimensional extraterrestrial beings that are jumping in between dimensions, and perhaps they're one of the very few who have the ability to do so. And aren't they connected with the dog as well? That when they come over here into this dimension, they're able to turn themselves into a dog. Very few physical apparitions that they're able to turn themselves into, so they're kind of like shapeshifters as well.
Yeah, no, I dug into that a bit when I was researching Anubis, and I found out that there's an ancient Mesopotamian goddess who was involved in healing people, and her healing technology would only go so far to the point where she couldn't do anything unless she turned people back into their original animal forms. And once she turned people back to their animal forms, then she could finish healing them. So it's like there's definitely some technology, it seems, maybe like it's almost like from the Star Wars, or not Star Wars, Transformers, how they have to transform back into different shapes in order to heal. So it's a pretty wild theory, but I don't know. I think there's something to it.
Katrina was saying in the comments, Katrina Acton, that isn't the Anubis amulet, wasn't the Anubis the deity of death?
Yeah, he was the one that guides people in the afterlife to the scale of judgment. And then he was also in charge of opening the mouth for the deceased so that they could still speak in the afterlife. So that's a little bit of a history on Anubis there.
Cool.
Yeah, so I guess I'll move on to the next slide then, or did you have any more questions on that one?
Yeah, no, go ahead to the next one.
All right, so the next one, I was doing a little bit of researching on that winged disc symbol, and I happened to find out that the Zoroastrians, or some of the Zoroastrians, call him Ahura Mazda. Mm-hmm. And then I managed to check out those tablets from the ROM and notice that they have the same wing disc symbol, even holding the ring in some cases, like the Zoroastrian one still does. And then stumbled across the book by Albert Pike, who wrote the Ahura Mazda is actually the secret meaning to Freemasonry. So I thought that was kind of interesting. When I bought Pike's book and opened it up, lo and behold, he wrote all about the light beings too. So he was pretty much right on the same track of research that I am, it appears.
So now, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear.
Okay, so now this image of this person with wings looks like it's holding onto a stick. So is that a representation of someone who has the ability of flight, and they're showing that this person was operating some sort of a device that brought them here, like i.e. a UFO, USO, or a interdimensional craft of sorts?
Yeah, that's a lot of the theories I heard about the winged disc over the years. Like listening to shows like Coast to Coast, I heard that it was like a Nibiru. Some people thought that was the symbol for, and then some people think it's a UFO. But when I started digging into it, I pretty much know exactly what this symbol is. He's standing inside of a mirror, and that's what this ring is. And I'll get into some slides later to prove that that's the case. But basically what this is I think that the mirror was like a gate or a portal of communication between shamans and the Anunnaki. So that's what the winged disc represents to me. And then those serpents that come down from the top of the winged disc, even the Zoroastrians call them like the serpents of knowledge. One is for good and one is for evil. So that's why these guys that are always huddling underneath the winged disc are holding on to it, is they're trying to gain knowledge. Yeah, and then I got into a little bit of debates with people too about saying whether or not Albert Pike knew what he was talking about. So I don't know if you've ever covered the occult layout of Washington, D.C. before.
I've seen it on some Ancient Alien shows where they've shown similar monuments that have been laid out to pretty much like a welcome to the star people that were here.
Yeah. No, this design is kind of popular. Like people share it on conspiracy network sites and stuff, but it's basically a pentagram that's laid out into Washington, D.C. And some of the monuments that make it up are the White House and such. But if you finish the diagram, most people see just the pentagram part, but it actually makes a larger pyramid shape from like the Kennedy Center, the White House, the Albert Pike statue. And then it turns out that there's like an eye on this pyramid shape. And lo and behold, people want to guess, or I guess they can read it up top, is that inside of that eye just happens to be Freemason headquarters. So, and it's also where they put Pike's tomb, the guy that wrote that book. So if people are going to argue with me that saying Pike doesn't know what he's talking about when he says he's wrote the secret meaning to Freemasonry, I usually put this slide up as an example of why I think Pike did know what he was talking about.
Kind of on the side note as well, it also has the Starfleet insignia in that image.
Oh yeah, I never even noticed that.
Yeah, right here on the top there, there's the Starfleet arrow. So it's kind of, right there. If you come straight down, keep coming down on an angle, and then below the yellow up top, this yellow circle up top, and then you have the red line. Yeah. And then come below that, the two diagonal lines, and then the outside diagonal lines meeting into a point.
Oh yeah, right there.
That's right. That's the Starfleet insignia.
Oh, so, no kidding.
I've always believed that Janie Roddenberry had some sort of an experience.
Oh yeah.
He disappeared for I believe like a year or two before Star Trek, the original series, came out. And then when he came back, all of a sudden we had this Star Trek series, which has really evolved, and a lot of technology that Star Trek has talked about has come true in real life, and the stuff that we use on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, there's only one technology that really didn't come true, and that was the spaceship part of it, right?
Yeah, and that's coming, or we might already have it with the runaway civilization. But anyhow, that's that's a different rabbit hole at another time. But I
Yeah,
found it interesting that I find the Starfleet insignia in this image as well.
yeah,
So
that's very observant. No, I've actually done a lot of research on Gene Roddenberry. I'll just touch on it briefly because we could do a whole episode on it. But the last episode that he ever made before he died was called Clues. And what was the episode Clues about? But it was about the Starfleet ship. What is it? The Enterprise. The whole
yeah,
crew was exploring this new planet, similar to like the moon, like how we explored the moon. And then in that episode, what the clue was is that there was an advanced civilization there that was going to warn us away, and that they were doing so by giving us false probe data year after year after year, probe data that's false. So it's like, I don't often wonder if maybe that's where the flat earth movement got started, is like some people are suspicious of what's going on in space. I don't think the earth is flat, but what Gene Roddenberry was saying, maybe that there is an advanced civilization that's warning us not to come back.
yeah, that's they've said the same thing about the moon when Neil Armstrong landed and they were told not to come back.
Yeah.
And maybe were persistent and continue to go back. I think the Americans went back like 8 times, 7 times, 8 times, and landed on the moon.
Yeah, that's true. No, the flat earth movement really discredited a lot of people that used to like researching what's going on in space, right? Because it's like now it's like if you try to say that you're not really buying the official story, people try to move you over into the flat earth group. It's like,
Yeah.
well, just because I disagree with some of NASA's research doesn't mean I think the earth is flat. It's like, I don't know. It's a real shame. But hopefully now that Elon Musk launched that car into space, we got pictures, we'll see the end of the flat earth movement soon.
Yeah, that's a topic for another
Yeah.
another day.
All right. So what I did here too is, in case anyone's wondering how to get to the Draco Stonehenge and all this stuff up north, I just put a map here to show basically Kitchener, Toronto area. You take Highway 11 up north, and you basically take that one highway the whole way there. So it's not really hard directions to get there at all.
Now, any idea as to how old this Draco site may be?
Yeah, that's the wild part. Like at first, when I read the blog by the professor from the university, and he was putting a date on it, basically right after the end of the Ice Age, I was thinking, oh, that doesn't really sound that old, 10,000 years or so. But then I heard that the dates for the other places like Stonehenge and Egypt's pyramids are supposedly less than that. So it almost seems a little bit significant. If this place could be that old, then it would be one of the first, right?
Yeah, because all that ice that dissipated prior to that, the Great Lakes were empty basins, essentially big crevasses in the landscape. And
Yeah.
Lake Michigan, we have a Stonehenge at the bottom of the lake, and
Wow.
there's been some research done on it. And also, the Michigan Lake has a type of a Bermuda Triangle anomaly that's happening there as well, where boats and aircraft have gone missing.
Oh,
And,
yeah. I've
and
heard about that.
so I wonder, like that area, that entire area has like all kinds of anomalies attached to it, and it's one of the major energy points of the Earth. So perhaps the ancient Aboriginals had tapped into that energy, and then possibly, who knows? It's pretty
Yeah.
hard to speculate because we don't know much about their culture because they were eradicated essentially here in Canada.
Yeah, sadly.
Total injustice.
Sorry, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I just be quiet because I get pretty upset when I talk about
Yeah, no, that's terrible. Yeah.
Aboriginal people, because there's history that we've lost that's it's unnecessary.
No, it is terrible what happened. Yeah, I get choked up talking about it too. But yeah, I think you're right on the money with that. Like the Great Lakes area, they have a legend saying that, or history saying that the Great Lakes were shaped by the Creator to be the shape of the Thunderbird, basically. And if you put the Thunderbird above the Great Lakes, you can see how they look very similar. Huh?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then it turns out where the heart is there is a place called Sault Ste. Marie. And it's known as like the friendliest city ever. So it's like, it's neat how the heart of the Thunderbird happens to be the place where the most friendly people are. Right?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's going to be a debate where's the friendliest city, but that's what they put on their sign.
Any idea to what the crime rate in Sault Ste. Marie is?
It should be higher, I guess, just because it has a casino, and that usually goes hand in hand. I'll have to check into that.
That was a good one.
No, but one of the other cool things I found up north, if anyone's ever into Bigfoot, do you ever do Bigfoot shows or no?
I haven't done one.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to doing one. What do you think the Bigfoot is? Some people say he's an ET. Some people say he's native to the planet and just escaped observation. There's a lot of theories about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti.
Yeah. No, for sure. Like hearing all the different theories, like I was never sure myself what to think of it until I read the Epic of Gilgamesh. And then once I read the Epic of Gilgamesh and I heard a lot about his friend named Enkidu, I was like, man, Enkidu almost sounds like he's a species of Bigfoot. So that's pretty much my guess. Is it's like a supernatural type creature that was like created by the Anunnaki, right? No, and then once you get up north here, there was some reports about Bigfoot being spotted near the King Solomon's area. And there's a researcher named, Todd Prescott. So he interviewed the mining crew. And it was a wild story. It was basically the mining crew was off in the middle of nowhere where there's no roads or anything to get to it. And one of the crew happened to yell back saying, hey, stop throwing rocks at me. And then when he looked to see where his crew member was, it wasn't a crew member after all, but something that looked like a Bigfoot. And he ended up quitting his mining job. He said he could never go back out into the woods again. He was scared like to death of it.
Very crazy, because we have similar type of stories out here in near Merritt, just east of Whistler, BC. And there's been a lot of Bigfoot sightings in that area as well.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. It seems like Bigfoot's one of those things that's like a global phenomenon too, right? Like Yetis or Sasquatch or whatever you want to call it.
Seems to be in the northern hemisphere. We don't hear stories of Bigfoot coming out of, say, Africa or Australia or South America.
Well, there is the one place in South America called Patagonia, and I believe that translates to big feet in Spanish. So could be something with that, but yeah, no, but you're for sure, like in most cases, they're all up north, right?
Yeah, Tibet seems to be the furthest south.
Yeah,
that sightings of Bigfoot have taken place.
Yeah, so basically after I found out about that Bigfoot encounter, I was like, man, I'm going to start checking around the area and see what else is suspicious here. And that's when I came across the abandoned military base. It's built on top of a dormant super caldera. Mm-hmm. And it was plagued by UFO sightings back in the time of the Cold War. So I was like, isn't it interesting that it's like almost like some Anunnaki evidence here, right? If Anunnaki really are in spaceships, maybe they were the ones that were spotted next to this abandoned or a military base. Yeah, so if anyone wants to check it out, there's a page in the Blue Book archives so they can read up on that UFO encounter. I don't want to spend too much time on that one because we could probably make it into a whole nother show too.
Yeah, you can also go to UFOcan.ca. It's a organization based out of Vancouver that compiles all UFO data across Canada. It's a free site, free database.
Oh, nice.
That's available for the public.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out for sure. No, and then the picture I got here up on the slides next is this is the mountain that the offering table is located on the top of. Mm-hmm. And if you wanted to zoom in a little bit, that's basically right there is where the offering table is on the like the precipice or the main focal point on the top of the mountain. Mm-hmm. And then I noticed that the shape of the mountain is divided in half, almost like two pillars on either side. And then I was like, man, the Freemason artwork always puts that two-pillar design into it. So as soon as I was walking towards this mountain, I was like, man, this could be something here. Like this is probably the biggest clue besides the Bigfoot and the military base so far.
How far is the military base from that site?
I'd say it's about maybe 40-minute drive or so. And most of the roads there are about 90 kilometers an hour. So I guess you could do the math on that, how many kilometers, or someone could work it out into miles too. Basically not very far at all,
40,
like geographically
40, 50 kilometers.
Yeah.
30 miles, 25, 30 miles.
Yeah, so here at the top is the picture of what the offering table that's on that preface on the mountain up there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a really rough shaped looking one. Like when I first found it, I was like, maybe this was just created naturally by erosion processes and that people started using it for sacrifice, or it was actually carved in like a rudimentary fashion, like on the fly, but like a wanderer or something, and that it wasn't used for very long. So that's why they didn't put so much detail into creating it. But I wasn't really even sure, like when I first found this, if this offering table was very popular. And then I happened to get help from a researcher, J.J. Ainsworth. Have you ever followed her work?
Yeah, I know it quite well.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. So JJ shared pictures of offering tables around the world, especially Egypt. And she said that I should compare the two and see if they looked similar. And I found that they looked very similar, other than the rudimentary form of it. Yeah, and if anyone wants to get an idea of like seeing these offering tables in person and then comparing it to the one up north, all these pictures are from the regular the collection that they have at the ROM, the Royal Ontario Museum.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to see both, like possibly the oldest offering table ever, and then the ones used by the Egyptians, you can see them both in one day, really. It's going to be a heck of a lot of driving, but
but it's worth it.
Yeah. No, and then it was really strange too. When I first found the offering table, it had shamanic mushrooms growing all around it. So I'm like, I wasn't familiar with this species of mushrooms before. So I just took pictures and brought them back home and posted it online. And then I eventually found out it was the Amantia mushroom, but just an orange variety rather than the common red variety you find associated.
Are these magic mushrooms?
Yeah, they're the ones that are popular with the reindeer legend. You know, the reindeer were eating mushrooms or whatever.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, and then they also bloom at the dog days of summer. And I found that interesting, like the Sirius connection, the dog days of summer. Seems like a lot of different things were coming together here with this. But
especially with the dog being associated, because we know that that's connected to Anubis.
Yeah, it's really strange how so many of these things all connect. Like, just looking at it some days, I don't even believe it myself. It seems too unreal to believe, but I just keep researching it and trying to get to the bottom of it either way. Yeah, so people have been asking too if I tried eating these mushrooms, and it's like I used to be a pretty wild partier back in the day when I was a kid, but these days it's like I'm not really into that kind of stuff anymore. So there's no way I would touch mushrooms like that.
So do you know if these are edible and or are they poisonous?
Yeah, it's actually half and half. Basically, what these mushrooms have is poison in them,
mm-hmm.
but it's like a mild toxin. And most people that prepare them say that they know a way to boil them or reach a certain temperature that it keeps the active substances but gets rid of the poison.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely don't recommend anyone experimenting with this stuff. That's for sure.
Yeah, mushrooms are quite dangerous. That's why I was asking whether. Now I wonder if the ancient Aboriginals had the know-how of extracting the magical properties of this mushrooms, like we find the Aboriginal tribes in the Southwest, eating peyote and stuff like that, because we know we can get high and hallucinate off of mushrooms. Now, is that the type of effect this mushroom would have?
Yeah, the one of the previous guests on the show, Curtis, I asked him about that because he's a part First Nations, and he said, yeah, he believes that the shaman or the Ojibwe shaman, they knew all about this mushroom. So I don't think it was really a mystery. But I thought that was kind of strange because in school I'd always heard that the shamans for the First Nations people only use fasting and stuff. So I was kind of surprised that there was a shamanic element to their history as well.
But mushrooms are also kind of sacred in my opinion, because
Yeah.
there's evidence that the mushroom originates from space, that its spore can go dormant for millions of years, and somehow it hitched a ride on a meteorite, landed here on Earth, and became active, and then next thing you know, we have all different types of mushrooms.
Yeah.
That's almost pretty much proven that that it's a space-based organism.
Yeah, I was checking, I did a blog about evolution for Adept Initiates, and it seems like mushrooms might be one of those missing links that we keep trying to find, not only for like species evolution, but maybe for conscious evolution as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Consciousness. Yeah, so basically what I did is I had a theory that...
DMT?
Sorry?
Is it DMT that I'm thinking about?
There's a couple different psychoactive chemicals. There's DMT. What is the other one? Psilocybin. There's also that one in South America that's really popular, ayahuasca. So I don't know if ayahuasca is maybe related to DMT. Could be. Now and then I decided that I was going to try my theory that the ancients used bags to carry water and fill offering tables, sort of like we see in these pictures here with the Anunnaki. I know that magic bag is actually really popular around the world too, right? So what I did is I poured it, filled it up, and then I tried doing some stargazing that night to see if I could have any luck connecting to the universal internet or the Akashic records. And I had some mixed results. It's like at first I didn't think it was really much to it. Like I didn't see any web browser open or anything like Google. So I was like, oh, maybe I failed and I didn't really get any information from this stargazing after all. But then later on, I noticed when I went to sleep, my dreams drastically changed and started leading me to go to an island. And I guess I'll talk about the island maybe a little bit later, or maybe if we get time in another show. And then there was also a case too where my family...
I'll stop you there for a minute.
Sure.
You rose my curiosity. And now, when you mention island, now is this island somehow connected to the turtle? Because there's Aboriginal mythology that a turtle came down here to Earth and then began piling dirt on top of each other until there was a small island, and then from that all the continents came to be.
Yeah, no, there's definitely the Turtle Island mythology, something I checked out. I would say it would be like all of North America. Let's see if I can find the slide here. You can see how the ancients managed to say that North America looked like the shape of a turtle.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually looks very similar from the satellite imagery. So people are debating whether or not if they actually just guessed the shape as a turtle, or if maybe shamans were able to do out of body and go high enough in order to see that it looked like a turtle, or if the history or legend, if you want to call it that, was actually true. But no, I'll show you the location of the island too. I actually had it just up on the other slide. Where is it? There it is. Yeah, the island is located, let's see, I guess it's turned sideways on me. Yeah, it's this big landmass here. And it's the largest island in the world that happens to be located in fresh water. So it holds a record for that. And
I
it
don't
also...
see it. I just see the, how did the ancestors know?
Yeah, here, it's right underneath just the top of Lake Huron here.
Oh, yeah, okay, I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I gotcha.
And it's really cool for people that like animals, because this was the creator, part of the history or legend says that the creator made the most diverse animal population in the world on that island. And that's actually was still the case up until like Europeans arrived and slaughtered most of the animals. But so at one point, like even if you go there today, you'll see species of animals there that you've never seen anywhere else in the world.
Amazing. I didn't know that. Nice to learn something.
Yeah, and then on that island too, they also happen to have the legendary Dreamer's Rock. And that's like a sacred stone that the creator put there so that shaman could sleep on it and manage to contact the creator directly and speak to him. And then one of the famous prophets or shamans, I guess, from the First Nations culture. His name, I think Shawanasawi, something like that. Anyways, he had an encounter with the creator. And just like you had talked on the show earlier, he was instructed not only to build totem poles, but where to build it and how to align it to the solstice and equinoxes. So I thought that was kind of interesting that solstice and equinox connection came from the creator.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah. And one of the things the creator did too is how he showed the prophet this is he said, here, look into this pool. And he had an offering table pool that was giving him the wisdom. So I was like, here's that connection again. Yeah, so I guess I'll minimize those ones. Yeah, and the other thing that happened to me on this mountain too is I can't really get into too many details about it just because some privacy issues, but someone in my family was going through like a really rough medical situation. Mm-hmm. And it was really going to take nothing short of a miracle in order for them to overcome it. So when I went up onto that sacred mountain, I tried praying. And when I got back to the city, lo and behold, I found that the miracle I've been praying for occurred. So some people are going to say that's not really substantial evidence, but to me, that was a pretty huge factor too.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. You don't need physical evidence. Well, that is physical evidence.
Yeah. Well, I like to be able to back it up with some data too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then here's I mentioned too that the offering table that we have here up north matches the similar one in Bulgaria. And it's not just like the offering table, but even the roads that are in the horizon are pretty much on the same path. The town that they put in the horizon is basically in the same path. A lot of the surrounding mountains match it also. And the elevation matches. So at this point here, I was like, man, this is really strange how this place in Canada matches Bulgaria so closely and why, right? Like what could possibly the connection be between the two, right?
Yeah, I'm wondering the same thing.
Yeah. So I checked into the history of the Thracian people. They're the people that used to live in Bulgaria before, Europe's changed populations over and over again, borders over and over again. But it's like basically the ancient Thrace people, the ones that were using the symbol on my shirt. I was able to dig up that they were an ancient red-haired people. I was like, isn't that funny? Eh? It's like we always hear the red-haired giants, and now I'm tracing the Thracians back to having red hair. And to be fair, I've talked to people in Bulgaria who don't agree with this red hair theory about the people that used to live in their home or their land. But even like the graves there, they have pictures of red-haired people on them. And they said that the tombs were labeled Rufus, and that meant that they had red hair. Yeah, and then the other part of the evidence I found here is that Darius the Great, I'm sure you might have heard of him if you study Persian history at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was involved with wiping out the Thrace. And the reason he was doing it is he had some help with the Jewish priesthood, so the new religions were taking form. And that he also was involved in a massive gold heist, possibly like one of the biggest gold heists in history. So people were always wondering, like, where did the Thrace get all their gold? And they were saying that, like, they had gold mines in Bulgaria or Thrace, but not near enough to make up, like, the huge quantities that they had, right? So then I was like, oh, I know that the area here in Canada has gold too. So is it possible that the Thracians were actually getting their gold from a secret gold mine in Canada? Sounds like
Let me just quickly diverge here for a second. Do you think that Solomon's gold mine in Canada is somehow connected with Oak Island?
Oh, yeah. Like Oak Island is kind of a funny mystery. I started researching it, I think, back in the 90s, so it's been a while. But yeah, to summarize what happened at Oak Island, I don't know if I want to give away a spoiler alert, but if anyone's watching the show, I know it's pretty popular. But who is that guy? One of the famous U.S. presidents, Roosevelt, I think it was. It's like he ended up going to Oak Island with some mining equipment and got whatever was out of there out. And then the official story says that there's a mystery about what happened to Roosevelt's mission. They're saying it was too foggy around that night to actually tell whether or not he did get the treasure out or if the mission had to be called off because there was too much fog. And then I found out that in the basement of the White House, they built a huge vault and they didn't tell anyone what they were going to put in the vault. But that was right around the time that Roosevelt did that mission to Oak Island. So I think Oak Island actually had the Ark, and the Ark was part of this Magi technology, and they moved it to the basement of the White House. And that's why part of the legend says that it always had to travel a certain direction, and that the nation that had it in its possession would be unstoppable. And we've seen the US go through a lot of trying times, but is it just coincidence that they always seem to come out on top? Right? Maybe.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, so if anyone wants to jump into the archives of some of the stuff I read on Adept Initiates, I shouldn't talk too much about that because I've got a few more slides to go into, but I think the blog for that one was called something to do with Oak Island Mystery. Don't got the exact title on hand. Now, so the other part of this theory too is like, how the heck could the Bulgarians get the gold or the Thrace if the water was like the only highway in the olden days, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't think like traveling 8 or 9 hours north of Toronto that there was any waterway that would connect. But lo and behold, it turned out that the Ottawa River goes all the way up and connects to the lake that the Draco Stonehenge is on.
Really?
And, yeah, so people that are from the States or other parts of the world that are watching your show, like the Ottawa River isn't some little small creek or something. It's like a huge river, like one of the biggest ones in our country. So it's not like they had to take canoes or small boats. They could have really moved a lot of gold using this water highway.
Yeah.
And people are arguing with me a little bit too about how old the river is and saying that maybe the Ottawa River isn't really that old, so it couldn't possibly have happened that way. But then I found out that the Ottawa River actually goes down fault lines. So most of the rivers that we have in our country are usually that case, that they're laying on top of the underground faults. So basically the Ottawa River after the Ice Age, it's like it could be as old as the fault line itself, right?
Yeah, well, if it's sitting on top of a fault line, it would make sense that it would be possibly that old.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And just to summarize too, if anyone not from Canada doesn't know, the Ottawa River connects to the St. Lawrence, which is also another huge waterway, and it goes right out to the ocean. So there wasn't any part where they had to move any of this gold on foot at all. If they wanted to do it, they had the highway going right there, and it was the most popular one too.
They could have unloaded at the St. Lawrence Causeway and then headed back up north.
Yeah, and then I'm glad you brought that up, because right where the place I believe they were unloading and loading the gold is in Montreal, a place called Magog, and it happens to be the Freemasons' largest outdoor meeting facility. So I was like, isn't it interesting that the Golden Rule Lodge for the Freemasons with a giant owl on the top happens to be located in the same spot where it would have been ideal to load this gold up.
Yeah.
So maybe that's just another coincidence, but I don't know. When I start seeing so many coincidences pile
no
up.
such thing.
Yeah.
No such thing as coincidences. They're either facts or they're not.
Yeah. No, and here's just a little chart too. Like after I found out about this possible gold route, I was like, why would they even move the gold from here? Like, isn't there a better place, like mines in Africa or Alaska or something that they could have moved the gold, or even California? But it turned out the buddy of mine that works in the mine, he's like, yeah, check this out. It turns out the Kirkland Lake gold here in Canada at this site is the second best in the whole world. So I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing that it's not only good gold there, but it's the second best in the world.
What's number one on the list?
Klondike Mines in the United States, Fire Creek. And then beneath that, they got Russia, then the Barrick Gold Company. Yeah, I'm surprised we don't really have too many from Africa up there. Huh? Yeah, I've never been into gold mining much myself, so this was a big surprise to me. I was like, how have I lived in Ontario my whole life and not heard that there's the best gold in the whole world just a few hours north? Right?
Pull out the shovel.
Yeah. No, so that's basically when I found out that this was the second best gold in the world that the Thracians were moving. I was like, this also reminded me of the King Solomon's mine. It's basically the history of King Solomon, if people haven't heard about it. It's like, according to the Bible, he had like a crap load of gold, and people are trying to figure out where he got it from. And then it also says here that some of the silver associated to King Solomon's mine was proven a link back to the Phoenicians. And for people who don't know, the Phoenicians and the Thracians have a very similar bloodline. Like they're both listed on the Table of Nations, tracing back to Noah. Yeah, and then here's where I put the map together to see where the spot from Bulgaria would move the gold all the way. And I noticed some of the places that I marked on here is the offering table, that place in Magog. It turns out Magog is also the name of Noah's grandson, and that it's an ancient name that the First Nations people believe means massive body of water. So I was like, wow. Yeah, it's like, isn't that weird too? And then
there's another coincidence.
Yeah. One of the other shipping points I noticed too in Lebanon, where like all the crises in Syria and stuff is going on, they have what is it, an ancient port city there, and the city is named Sidon, and it was used by the Phoenicians, and Sidon also happens to be a name of Noah's grandson also. So I was like, isn't it funny how people make fun of Noah all the time, but yet there's all these ancient cities all over the world that are named after his grandkids? It's like, I know the animals part sounds hard to believe, but I think there's a little bit of truth to that story, if not more than a little.
Just misunderstood.
Sure. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I'll cover. Here I've got the Manitoulin Island. You can see it there. There's the picture of the logo the First Nations people use for the Dreamer's Rock. And I marked some of the other places like the Serpent Mounds that are in Ohio. We also have some here in Ontario. So those Serpent Mounds aren't really exclusive to just that one spot. And some people wonder if these Serpent Mounds are also connected to Draco. Yeah, and then what is it? Another island in the Mediterranean called Malta. That island also had a whole bunch of winged disc artifacts that they found there. So I was thinking it's pretty obvious that the ancient people in Malta had interactions with the Phoenicians. All right, so after I finished out all this correlation, like figuring out that I'm on to possibly solving the mystery of King Solomon's gold mine, that's when my aunt showed me the Anubis amulet. And this is the first picture she showed me. And you can see it doesn't really look like Anubis at first, just because he's got this really weird mouth opening and that his color was a bit off. But the more I dug into it, yeah, here's a picture of the house. Like remember I was saying was found in the ruins of a house.
Yeah.
So that's what the house looked like when my family was actually first starting to move in. So you can start to get an idea of what some of the early European immigrants were up against, right? It's like it wasn't definitely moving into a paradise.
No, not at all.
No, but yeah, it's hard to say, like looking at that house, and if it looked that old 50 years ago, like how long could the Anubis amulet have been in the ruins of it for, right? Like I would say maybe even another 50 years or possibly longer. Right?
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. Minimum another 50 years, 100 years, 120 years.
So my aunt started sharing some higher definition pictures of the amulet so I could get a better look. And then I found out that it actually is a black color. It was just like the lighting was bad in the first picture she showed it to me. And that this mouth open on Anubis isn't very popular in Egypt, but it turns out that the Phoenicians had a version of Anubis also, and they drew him with his mouth open. And the reason being was that whole opening of the mouth ceremony in the afterlife.
What is the material the amulet is made of?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. That was probably one of my favorite test results. It's like I took it to the most advanced lab in Toronto that I could find to look at it. And they got it all scanned for me in 3D. And then they looked at the metal type and then they were really puzzled by it. They're like, how the heck is this thing thinner than a diamond, yet it's like super strong? Like the amulet looks pretty thick, I guess, in a photograph, but it's like paper thin and almost unbreakable. So they were asking me, it's like, how can this thing be so old and yet it has all these qualities of stainless steel to it? They think that it's like a special type of stainless steel, similar to what was found in Damascus, like the Damascus steel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like almost rust proof, but if you like zoom in with a microscope, you can see little specks of rust have actually started to take. But it was in my family's toy drawer for like a good 50 years, and we just played with it as kids. So the lab in Toronto was amazed at how thin it was, the properties of the metal and the paint. They said the paint was really odd because they figured that more of it would have peeled off because it's really hard to get different types of paint to stick to that material.
Mm-hmm.
So they were really amazed, and they suggested that I take the paint and get it tested too, because if it's an animal-based paint, they should be able to carbon date it.
Have you had it tested yet?
Yeah, what happened was I talked to the University of Ottawa, and luckily they were all for doing a radiocarbon test for me. But it wasn't even really the money issue. It's like kind of an expensive test, like $500 or whatever. But to figure out if that's really what it is would be easily worth $500 to me. But no, what happened is they require a substantial amount of paint in order to do a test sample. And this amulet's tiny. Like, I don't know if I got a copy of it here.
Do you have it to show to us?
Here's an identical copy of it that I got the lab in Toronto to make. And what I did too is I put a copy of the 3D printing file on my website. So if anyone wants to make an identical copy of it, they can just go onto my website, download the file. Even the library will make 3D prints for free in some cities. So even if you don't have access to a 3D printer in your house, you can probably go to the library and get a copy made.
That's right.
Yeah.
Library in Edmonton offers that, and they have
nice.
a studio set up for amateur musicians to record their stuff.
Sick. Yeah, just like my library. Oh yeah, and to get back onto the question there, it's like if they were going to test the paint, but they said in order to get a paint test like size or quantity for the test that they need, they're pretty much going to have to peel all the paint off of it. So I was like, it's almost like in a way we're going to have to destroy it to test it. So that's the only part that I was a little bit hesitant. I'm like, man, I don't want to be the one responsible for destroying this, especially if it turns out that it is old. But the last resort is when I brought these copies to a convention in Toronto. I happened to be able to show them to different ROM employees that were at the convention, and they loved the thing, and they want to test it there too. So I'm bringing it to the ROM Museum in Toronto, and hopefully they'll be able to do some sort of paint test that won't require like stripping it and destroying it, right? Yeah, so if anyone is familiar with the ROM's Egyptology department, it's Gail Gibson supposed to be getting back to me about this, and I'm just waiting on her call now. I don't want to like flood her inbox with messages saying to get back to me about it, but if anyone else wants to help with that, if they know her, that'd be cool. Because it's also the year of the dog this year too, right? So wouldn't it be funny if the Anubis amulet gets tested this year and it turns out to be legit? It's like part of me is still thinking like there's no way this Anubis amulet can be legit. It has to be some sort of fake. And I'm almost hoping that too, because I damaged it a lot when I was a kid, and I don't want to be responsible for damaging something that's priceless. But who knows? Maybe it'll turn out to be real and it'll end up in the museum. It's still a possibility.
Yeah, there's very much a possibility.
Yeah. Now, and the other weird thing too, that whole theory about people faking the amulet, it's like copies of Anubis usually don't look like this. So it's like, why would someone make a fake copy of Anubis and match it to a Phoenician design that no one's going to recognize, right? So I don't know. I think if I was a person faking an artifact, I'd probably make it more recognizable just so I could have a better chance of selling it maybe, or who knows. Yeah, and then it was weird too that my aunt mentioned this Anubis amulet, and I started looking at it, and I'm like, what is it? Anubis, yeah, you can see it here. He's on one of the offering tables, and it shows him pouring a jug and filling a water offering table. And then I put the pictures together, and I'm like, it's kind of funny how it's like I got just randomly looking up north, and I happened to be dressed almost the same way as Anubis and filling an offering table the same way he was. Some people are thinking that the Anubis amulet has an effect on people and that it can like guide them to do things without even knowing. So I don't really believe in that theory, but it seems strange to me, like how similar we looked. Just the way my hat is shaped like his nose and everything. Right? And then I guess people are going to say that I found the amulet first, but if you want to go back into the archives of following my research, you can clearly see that I didn't know anything about the Anubis amulet until after I had taken these pictures. Yeah, and then what I was doing too is comparing that offering table shape to the different ones around the world. And it turns out King Solomon's temple is actually that same shape. So maybe another coincidence where offering table the shape of King Solomon's temple is right next to King Solomon's mine. I don't know, maybe. Then the Pyramid of the Sun, Göbekli Tepe, Ziggurat of Ur, Stonehenge, and Khafre, they all seem to have this similar design and shape.
There were two temples of Solomon. There was one in Iran.
Oh, really?
As well. An identical copy.
Now, that's what Albert Pike wrote about in his book there that we talked about in the beginning. It's like he was all into the ancient history of Iran. That was probably a good chunk of what that book was about. So here's one of the weirdest coincidences, I guess, of all. Is one of the researchers that used to help me with this project happened to point out that the offering table in Bulgaria, it has a chamber that's man-made nearby, and it happens to be a Anubis chamber, and the Anubis chamber matches the same shape as the amulet. So it's maybe the weirdest coincidence out of all of them, I think. But then there's that Bulgaria connection again too, right? Keeps coming up over and over again. Yeah, so at this point, it's like I started doing conventions, telling people about the Anubis amulet, and it actually got me a volunteer job, like up here at 98.5 CKWR. And I started telling everyone about this on the radio. And it's been relatively popular. Like, I know it's a late night show and it probably is not going to take off as much as a primetime show, but I've heard some good results about it.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And then it was kind of cool that one of the hosts during this radio interview, he's like, man, you keep tracing this back further and further and further. He's like, first you had King Solomon's mine, and then the Phoenicians. It's like, could be someone older using this site, even older than King Solomon or the Phoenicians. So that's when I started to check, like, what is the oldest case in history that's famous about offering tables? I don't know if you can think of a famous case of offering tables or.
No.
Well, it turns out the most famous case is
Cain.
Yeah. There it is. No, I was laughing because I'm like, here's Cain and Abel, and they have this old story about an offering table. I'm like, there's no way that this is going to be used by Cain and Abel, right? And there's quite a few, passages out of the Bible that give details about where Cain and Abel were. And all I have to do is take those and match it to what I found. And if it doesn't match, then yeah, there's no way that there's connections, right? So yeah, I guess if I'm ready to move on to the next one. Basically, this theory that I got going is that Cain and Abel were basically in Bulgaria and Canada. So the ancient place where the murder of Abel took place was one of the spots in Bulgaria. I believe when he got banished all the way to North America.
Oh, yeah.
And you know how the Anunnaki are always associated with gold?
Yeah.
And then some people think that the God from the Bible and the Anunnaki are somewhat connected.
Yahweh.
Yeah. So isn't it kind of strange that if the God of the Bible is related to the Anunnaki and he's really into gold, if he goes to banish Cain somewhere that's really far away, wouldn't he put him somewhere where there's a lot of gold? So there's another little bit of a clue to that too, I think.
Put his ass to work.
Yeah, really. Like your punishment for killing your brother is going to be mining for the rest of your life.
That's right. Hard labor.
Now, it sounds like a really strange theory, so I should get to some more of the evidence to back this up here. It's like, the passage of the Bible talks about Cain and what happened after he got cursed and stuff. And basically it says that after he killed his brother, his blood touched the ground, and that he was never able to grow food again. So no matter how many times he tried to farm crops for his family, the crops would always die and never produce food. So in order for God to save Cain, like he wanted to punish him but not kill him, so he also gave him the ability to build great cities out of stone. So isn't it strange that we're always hearing this talk about where the Sumerians got the ability to build these great cities out of stone, out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
We have this tale from the Bible that explains exactly that, but I guess most people aren't going to want to believe it for one reason or another. But No, and then the other thing too is when Cain got to this land of Nod, that he was banished to a faraway place, he built a city and he named it after his son Enoch. So I was like, in order to prove this isn't a connection, I just got to check in North America, no city named Enoch, and there we go. I can move on to another mystery. But lo and behold, it turns out that the Aztecs had a city and they named it T. Enoch Titlan. And it happened to be built by a guy that wandered from way far up north. So I was like, okay, maybe I should check into this a little bit more still, right? Before I move on. Right? Sounds like a bit of a coincidence. And oh yeah, people want to say too that the city, the Aztec city Enoch or T. Enoch Titlan isn't connected because that name isn't really old. And it turns out that name goes way back in history so far that it's a mystery and no one knows who named it that and why. So,
cool.
Yeah, so I guess it's still a possibility there. Yeah, and this really summarizes like a lot of the stuff that the coin, like remember I was telling you the coin the light beings gave me and I was supposed to find out what it meant?
Yeah.
So that coin happened to have that image of the bird and the sacred tree. And lo and behold, it turns out the legend about building Tenochtitlan happens to be a symbol, and that symbol is the same symbol that was on the coin. So I was like, isn't that another coincidence, eh? Yeah, it's almost hard to believe, like how that could have just been a coincidence, right? That the coin ended up having the symbol on the legend about the offering table that might have been used by Cain. It's like,
what's the age on that coin? Do you know?
The coin that the light being gave me was 1964.
No, I mean this one in the image.
Yeah, it's the same one.
Same one?
It's just the reverse side of it.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
No, we'll get into, I guess, yeah, I should mention it now. Like on the other side of the coin was the Aztec leader I talked about.
Yeah.
And how he was tortured and killed. And guess what he was killed and tortured to reveal? The location of a lost gold mine up north. I was like, okay. Yeah. So it's like maybe this gold mine wasn't just used by King Solomon and the Phoenicians, but even the Aztecs looked like they were in on it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what a weird coincidence.
They were all about gold.
Yeah. No, it's amazing how much gold plays a part in it. Yeah, and here's the real kicker too. Like, you know how I said I got the job talking on the radio? Like one episode we did was on Atlantis.
Mm-hmm.
And we started reading like all this research on Atlantis. And I'm like, wait a minute, this city Tenochtitlan that I just started researching matches every single description of Atlantis. I'm like, why aren't people talking about it, right? And then I found out that this is actually the same thing that the Nazis, what is that one occultist, Blavatsky, I think it is. They went on and on and on about how that they believe that Atlantis was these South American pyramids.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that theory fell out of favor after the war for obvious reasons and stuff, right? And then, yeah, questions came up like, oh, how does this legend match? Well, the history of Tenochtitlan says that it got wiped out by a great flood after falling out of favor with the gods. And then it got repopulated in multiple phases, like getting wiped out, repopulated, wiped out, repopulated. And the last phase where it got wiped out was when the Spanish came in and they also drained the lake. So that's why people, when they go to Mexico City today, they're like, there's no way that there was a Atlantis here in water because it's all dry. Mm-hmm. But it turns out that it used to be a lake and it got drained.
It's built on top of a swamp.
Yeah, that's what they said, is they never got rid of all the swampy land.
Yeah.
Even after they drained it, it was still swampy.
And then they had to create artificial islands.
Yeah.
And the city is built around that.
No, and here's another great piece that JJ helped out with. She's like, you should check out the offering table shape in South America, like the Aztecs. And behold, it's the same shape. So I was like, well, I guess it could be another coincidence or just quite a few lining up. Oh, yeah, and then there's the location here, too. Yeah, let me show you. It's like, basically, if you go from Tenochtitlan here in Mexico, and you draw a line all the way to the Strait of Gibraltar, you end up, let's see if I can zoom out here. Yeah, there we go. So you can see that it connects to Gibraltar, and it's basically a straight line from there, like almost like Gibraltar's pointing at it. I was like, isn't that funny how that's what Plato's description of Atlantis was too, right? He was always saying that it was beyond the Straits of Gibraltar.
Yeah.
And then the path crosses over some land around Cuba and Florida. People are like, oh, that doesn't connect because you'd have to go around.
Does that connect with the Bermuda Triangle?
Yeah, so the funny part is this part where it goes around the land is like around the Bermuda Triangle, but it's also the Road of Bibony. That's the one that Edgar Casey wrote about, saying that it was going to be one of the clues to finding Atlantis.
Yeah.
So really, we got the history of it that matches. We got basically what Plato was saying. It's like we got Edgar Casey, pretty much anyone who's written about Atlantis. All of these clues keep pointing at Tenochtitlan, but a lot of people.
Casey is pretty hard to argue with.
Yeah, like the Sleeping Prophet, he did so much great work. So I don't know, like people got other theories about where Atlantis is, and I love hearing them because personally, I'm hoping one day that someone will find Atlantis, and my research will be just another stepping stone that helped them along the way, sort of thing. Or it's like I'm not going to argue and say that my theory is the only way. If someone else has got more information on Atlantis, I'm more than happy to look into it.
Yeah, that's a great attitude.
Yeah. No, so then after I found out about this Atlantis history, that offering table, I guess I should bring it up again quick. The one that I had image before, it shows that the Bulgarian offering table has a Stonehenge nearby. So my friend that was helping me at the time, she mentioned that I should check in Canada to see if we have a Stonehenge. And then that's where I found the professor's blog saying that there actually was a Stonehenge and it's right next to the offering table, just like the sister site in Bulgaria. All right, so here we got the image of the boulders. And you can see how on one of them, it sort of looks like a face. It's got the eye and stuff. And that's like a similar theme that people find on the blocks and other Stonehenges. I don't know, we'll have to ask about the Australian Stonehenge. I want to check more into that one too. Right? I wonder if it has some of the same face features on it.
Possibly you can get in contact with Evan Strong.
Yeah.
Or the Forgotten Origin group. And
cool.
Get more information there.
Yeah, and then one of the things that makes these stones stand out is they got boulders that are underneath on different angles to make sure that the stone is propped up just right. And it's like, I don't know, in nature, too many times that happens. So I think that's one of the main clues that it actually is a man-made or that type of formation. Yeah, and here you can see too that the trees have really grown in, and that the professor, when he wrote his blog, he wrote that there was approximately 4 stones in this. So when I got to the site, what I did is I had my drone and I'm like, okay, I'm going to fly it above, hope that I can see better images of this place because the trees are blocking so much of it, right? And what happened was I took an orange blanket, ripped it up into pieces and put a piece on each block so that I could see it better from above. And then when I was doing that, I came across more and more boulders. And I'm thinking, geez, this original site of 4 boulders that the professor wrote about is looking more like 14 boulders. And then when I took the drone and flew it over and I mapped the layout, it's like it had like a serpent type layout to it. So I was like, man, I should really check to see what other serpent themes there are, like constellations. And that's when I found out about Draco matching it. Now, some people are saying that I got to make another image that's more better than this one. So on the next trip I go up, we're going to try to get exact measurements between each boulder rather than just like a above scene from a drone. But it's really hard to do this research there because like all those trees are in the way. And it's like, I'm not going to be the one that's asking the First Nations people to cut down all the trees there, right? I'm sure that's not what they want to do. But who knows? Maybe in the future, some people will agree to restore it and it'll be easier to study. But
that would be very cool.
Yeah. Well, hopefully in the future, more people get into this. Yeah, and it was weird too that Iran stuff kept coming up, like in Albert Pike's books. And I found out that Iran, like when I was at a convention, I met some people from Iran. they're telling me that the word Iran actually translates to home of the Aryans. And that's what Albert Pike wrote about in his book so much. And I was like, isn't it strange that one of the towns along this Draco-Stonehenge road is called Swastika? And that has like an old saying going back to the Aryans as well, and many other cultures, I guess, too, right?
Yeah, India in particular.
India and then Bulgaria.
Of years ago, Tibet.
It was funny, like some of the artifacts they were pulling out of Bulgaria, it was like some of the oldest gold artifacts in the world, and they had swastikas on them too. So I was like, I got to check out the history of how long this town's been called this. And it was called this since like 1908. So like way before the World War and stuff, right? Or World War II. And then the town was petitioned to change the name after what happened in the war, but they said that it had too much history to them that they didn't want to associate it with the Nazis. So they actually wanted to keep it and try to keep the name good or whatever. I guess they didn't really succeed in that, but yeah. And then the swastika.
Is the town still called Swastika?
Yeah, you can go and take a picture next to the sign still today if you want. And it's the original name Swastika was given to the town because of the Swastika Gold Company that came there, and then they named it after themselves. So it's interesting that these ancient Anunnaki are related to gold and Iran and the swastika, and that we're starting to get some of these clues there as well. Huh? Yeah, and here's like I mentioned, all these different sites along this road. One of the sites is a monument, and it's like a big giant like replica of a gold coin, and it's the gold coin that was first minted with the gold from these mines, and they put an image on it of a horse slaying a dragon. So it was actually someone. Yeah, it turns out like when I found this coin, I was getting help with a researcher who came all the way from Bulgaria to see it, and she was like, "Hey, this image you got on the coin here is from Thrace. This is a Thrace horseman." So it's like the coin right next to this Bulgaria hypothetical site has a Bulgarian image on it as well.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then the last connection to this coin, I think, is basically those light beings gave me the coin. And then that sacred tree's got the symbology of the serpent and the bird. And I had a guest on the Magi show, I guess maybe a month or so ago, Stein, and he was telling me all about the connections between these two symbols and how they're actually really related with the serpent mythology and stuff, even going back to like the Vedic texts and stuff. So I was like, yeah, so there was a connection between the coin that the light beings gave me and the coin that was at the right next to the Draco-Stonehenge. So I don't know, it's like some people are going to ask like, how the heck did that happen, right? But there's a lot of big Freemason lodges in this town, so I'm pretty sure a lot of them already knew about this history. And I don't know if have you ever heard about where Freemasonry originated?
No, not really.
Yeah, it turned out that the original Freemason was the son of the king of Bulgaria in ancient times. Well, not ancient, but a long time ago, during Bulgaria's golden age. So it's weird that Freemasonry is like home base is in Bulgaria. So I don't know. The Freemasons got all these legends where they talk about Cain being in a faraway place and building places like Atlantis too. So it's like, I don't know. It's like if the Freemasons were a big influence in this town, I'm pretty sure they could get a coin like this put up there, no problem. Right? Especially if they're able to change the layout of how DC looks. Yeah, so I guess this evidence is only maybe a week old. So the viewers of your show are getting a little treat here, that something I've never shared with any other show before.
Nice.
Yeah, it's like there's different circles that you find all around the world, like fairy rings and
most particularly in South Africa.
Yeah.
Michael Tallinger's done a lot of work on those.
Nice. Yeah, I love Tellinger's work. It's like his Ubuntu project is really good too.
Yeah, I love that project.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, these circles are known to be like energy spots, and they're all over the forests of Canada, but you can't see them from satellite, but you can see them from plane photography. I'm not sure why they don't appear in satellite. Maybe it's just too far away, but during plane photography, you can see them no problem. And it turns out there's a place in Ontario that's called the Lord of the Rings because it has the most of these forest circles.
Mm-hmm.
And it's right next to the Draco Stonehenge and the offering table.
Really?
So I'm like, is this another coincidence that all of these energy circles are concentrated right where the First Nations people said that they were going to build something to collect energy, right?
Very cool.
Yeah. And then, you know how, what is it, that famous pyramid in South America has the serpent shadow that goes up the steps?
Chichen Itza?
Yeah, that's the one. So I was thinking the professors, they got the Draco Stonehenge and they managed to find an alignment on the equinox for these boulders. But I was like, what happens if there's like another shadow, like that serpent going down the stairs that people haven't noticed yet? So then I noticed that Mount Kemenus, where this offering table is, casts a giant shadow on sunrise and sunset. And one of them happens to go right in the direction of the Draco Stonehenge and these rings.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm planning on doing is, like you can see here in this photo, that the shadow is actually quite visible.
Oh,
so
yeah.
what I'm hoping is like the holy grail of this research. If I can find where the shadow interacts with some of these things like the Stonehenge or the rings,
Mm-hmm.
that should be maybe the biggest point of evidence yet.
Maybe check on an equinox or a solstice.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like I actually bought a house up there so that I could spend more time and be there for the equinoxes and solstices, because taking the bus there back and forth, and it's really expensive.
Yeah, I bet.
No, the house I got up there, lucky, it's like that's the cheapest real estate in the entire country. You can buy like a 3-bedroom house for 10 grand.
No shit.
Yeah. So at least I didn't have to spend a fortune to get a place up there. No, and then I got I was just thinking that too, how I mentioned it's the cheapest real estate, and that God sent Cain to a place that was really awful. It's like Nod was considered horrible. So it's I don't want to make fun of the town because I guess I live there and I'm going to start talking to people, but it's like, man, it's funny how that it is really one of the harshest environments you can live in up there. And that's why the houses are so cheap. Yeah. So here's the image. One of the last ones I got for the show is the different rings that you find around the world, or
Mm-hmm.
circles. And you mentioned that you've been researching the one in Hudson Bay, right?
That's right.
Yeah, it's wild how Hudson Bay, like half of it is like the shape of almost a perfect circle, huh?
Yeah, it looks like an ancient meteorite strike. And
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
that's why there's huge gold deposits there, because that may have left some matter behind before. It must have been massive, but I think it skipped off and went out into space and went off to create our moon, but definitely left elements behind.
Yeah. No, it's a pretty wild theory. Like I like the meteor theory. There's another theory people talk about, how the electronic universe or electric universe, and how like lightning might have been involved with creating some of these. But
Mm-hmm.
it's weird that those forest rings that we showed on the pictures before, or there's one up there, some of them have like a hexagonal shape to them, and people are saying that that's more evidence for the electricity involved.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and that was the other thing too, is the scientific academics looked at these forest rings. And if you want to type it in Google, you can find a website about what they found.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest theory is that it's gas deposits underneath the ground that have managed to bubble up to the surface and created that ring shape. But the biggest flaw to that theory, they said, is the electronic fields. Like there's a really strong magnetic field tested in these rings, and they don't have an explanation of how gas could cause that. So it's still a bit of a mystery. And then some of the other circles that I put on this slide is like there's a giant lake in Quebec that's the shape of a circle. There's the cenotes in Mexico. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where they found that cuneiform bowl you were talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was at the bottom of one of those. Oh, another spot that these fairy rings are popular is in Bulgaria. So there's the Bulgarian connection again. Oh yeah, and then the Freemason books that talked about why the Freemasonry began in Bulgaria is because it had like some of the most sacred energy spots on the planet. So I don't know if that's true, but it's interesting that the Freemasons believe that. And then, oh yeah, there's the glacial potholes. Have you ever seen these here in Ontario? It's basically like it's like a hole that's been cut in by the glaciers, they believe.
Mm-hmm.
Sand and rock started spinning in a circle, and they carved giant, like perfectly shaped drill holes into solid rock. So there's, I guess, a few theories. It
could be hard to believe that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like the Egyptian thing. Like people are always trying to figure out how they drilled holes in solid rock without using power tools. And it seems like this is an example of how nature was able to do it without power tools. So maybe they copied a similar process, like using sand to carve stone. I know that's a big theory these days. Yeah, and so that's basically some of the theories behind these. Is it could be a meteor, it could be electric, it could be some sort of glacial process, but that's some of the latest information. I just find it strange that it's right next to the Draco Stonehenge that most of them are found. Right? Lord of the Rings. Yeah, and here's the shape of a Stonehenge recreated into its like original shape before it was destroyed. And I compared it to the offering table just to see like how it would look. And it's really surprising how similar the two are. Like even the central core seems to have like a staircase. And some people are theorizing that Stonehenge was like some sort of portal or a gate. So I don't know. Maybe the Anunnaki were using Stonehenge as like a teleporter from Star Trek. Who knows? Huh?
Also, when you look at the Vatican, the St. Peter's Basilica, I believe, where the obelisk is, that has the same dimensions as Stonehenge as well.
Oh, nice.
Of course, much bigger, but when you do the math, it all lines up as same, just like the pyramids at Teotihuacan and the Giza Plateau.
Yeah. Yeah, so many coincidences in so many places. Eventually, does it go beyond coincidence?
I think these are facts.
Yeah.
More so than coincidences. We've been playing that coincidence game for so long now that that we're starting to believe our own crap. So this is these are facts, and when things start lining up, we need to get away from that coincidence aspect and begin to look at it as historical fact. That's scientific evidence right there.
Yeah. No, I'm hoping that's the route we go in the future. Yeah, so here was just the total map of everything that I've been researching up north, so you can get an idea of where each location is. There's the UFO base, the Swastika Gold Town. There's a whole bunch of connections to the Irish people up there, and then that's where the red hair theory starts coming in, but I don't think we'll have a lot of time to cover that because we're getting close to 2 hours already. But there's the Draco, Stonehenge, the gold coin, and then the offering table. And I actually put highway to New York here because it's funny. If you take the same road that everything's connected on, it keeps going and it keeps going, and it goes in a south-westernly direction, and it happens to end right in Manhattan at a port city. And it's literally Yankee Stadium is on the same street. So it's like they always say the clues are hidden in plain sight. Wouldn't it be funny if like this Stonehenge and offering table are on the same street as Yankee Stadium? I don't know if that's a coincidence too, but it's kind of funny. Yeah, and then I was digging, one of the viewers asked about the symbol on my shirt here.
Yeah, that was Clarence Mitchell.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll see if I can talk about it here. Yeah, basically that symbol that's on my shirt, or this whole piece, is like an old relic that was found in somewhere in Europe, maybe in Bulgaria also. And it's that symbology that Richard Casaro always writes about, how it's like the God self icon where people are like holding two things.
Now, might that be the duality of I guess our physical matter, like we know that possibly in antiquity we were hermaphrodite species that didn't need anyone to you know what I mean? Breathe.
Yeah, procreate. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And then the duality would be the split, like the story of Adam and Eve. It would be a split between the duality, so that there's a male aspect and a feminine and a masculine aspect to the duality. And now we require one another to mate and then to reproduce. So I wonder, because I saw this on your show the last time, the letter A, and especially the one up top there, where beneath the lettering of Bulgaria. I wonder if that was the split of from hermaphrodite to being a single-sex species to a dual-sex species as we are today, the feminine and the masculine, and the duality and the polarity, the positive and the negative. God is God and Satan, because the opposite of light would be darkness. So Satan isn't someone that's somebody different. It's just the opposite of the divine. Yeah.
No, there is a really good explanation for, I like that one too. But it's, let's see if I can find the slide. Sorry, I didn't have it ready for it. But basically what it is, you know how when you look up, Robert Bauval did that work about Sirius and how Orion's belt points to Sirius and it matches the shape of the pyramids. Well, there's an old image like that in the ancient times, they used to draw a man holding up one object in one arm and the other to make up that Sirius constellation or the Orion constellation. It was the symbol for it. So I think that's a part of it too, is like it was a symbol pointing that we needed to connect to Sirius in order to get to God. And I don't know if that's like gods in the Akashic records, if that's what it's hinting at, or I'm really still trying to figure it out, but you can see that it's like
or maybe there's something that's built inside of us, like a homing beacon that gets us to go back to where we originated, and perhaps we originated in the Sirius star system.
Yeah, just like the Dogon and all that.
That's right. Too. That's right.
No, it's amazing how often Sirius comes up, right? Like, I guess it's because it's the brightest star in the sky, or yeah.
So, and your show, the Magi, the three belt stars are the three kings.
Yeah.
And then the three Magi are the three kings who I believe came to see Jesus.
Yeah.
Upon him. So there's a connection there as well.
Yeah. No, it's weird too that same symbology was found in the Inca version also. So it's like, it's almost more evidence that, maybe there was a Mesopotamian connection in South America at one point. And I try to make it clear too that not trying to portray a theory that Mesopotamians were the only people that were living in South America back then. Like, this theory says that Cain was the only one, right? So I don't think that there was a whole like giant population of Aryans there or anything. It was likely just one red-haired guy or a couple maybe kings or royal bloodlines that would have the elongated skulls left over. And that's basically what we're finding there today even, right? Like these elongated skulls with red hair that trace back to Mesopotamia.
And giants as well I believe in Ohio. The natives that trapped the clan of giants in a cave and smoked them out and killed them. And some of them had double-drove teeth and red hair.
No, luckily I had Heather Arnold on the show, and she's a pretty good expert when it comes to those giants. And she was telling me all about the double rows of teeth and how they were also found in Aruba. And Aruba had a gold mine there too. So it's like the gold mine and these red-haired giant theme seems to come up really repeatedly. Yeah, and it was neat too, just tracing how the letter A evolved. I found it funny how it's like we can trace the letter A all the way back to Bulgarian cave art now. It's like the Phoenicians put the letter A on its side, and I was wondering why they did that. And then I compared it to the Egyptian version. I was like, oh, that's why they did it. It's because it looks more like a bird's beak that way, right? So it's almost like language has gone in phases, how we've gone from pictograph to letters, back to pictographs, and then back to letters.
And now to emojis.
Yeah, how we're doing it today. So the cycle's never stopped. It just keeps going in like
That's right.
a circle. Yeah, and then there's the Ojibwe art. Remember how you guys were asking earlier in the show?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's no coincidence. Like these creatures on either side almost look like they have wings coming out. It's got the turtle mythology at the bottom for Turtle Island. It's got the sun and moon mythology, which is a big one. And then that it almost looks like half a wing disc that they put above the guy. So
Yeah.
a lot of similarities there, I believe. No, that's what I'm coming across here too. It's like, remember that first slide about the sacred tree being found in every culture?
Yeah.
It's like this cosmology theme seems to be found in every culture too. I guess because we all live on the same planet, you're going to be writing about the sun and the moon, but maybe it goes a little bit beyond that. Oh yeah, and then we covered too, I wasn't sure if we get time for this, what the winged disc symbol being a mirror, and why I think it's the case. I found some old Assyrian tablets, and they showed that the winged disc guy is literally standing inside of a giant mirror. Like his leg is the handle of the mirror. You can see the mirror going around him.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
he has wings coming out the side. And he's even holding shamanic plants. So there's that shaman connection again. And then if you look at that really famous ceiling art in Egypt, the one where all the pharaohs line up to talk to Thoth,
Mm-hmm.
hold, what are they standing in front of when they line up to talk to him? But a giant mirror. So I was like, if people are going to argue that the winged disc isn't a mirror, I guess I'm still up for checking into that. But just from this evidence, I'm really leaning towards the mirror theory. Oh yeah, and that was maybe my favorite part of evidence too. When we mentioned Robert Bouval's work and how he showed that Orion pointed to Sirius.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those mystery shafts in the pyramid don't only point at Sirius, but they also point at Draco. So what I'm thinking here is when you have an internet here in like in our modern age, there's always more than one server you connect to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if one server goes down, you go to the backup server. So that's what I think the Egyptian pyramids were designed for, is they had these shafts for internet connections. And each of these stars were different servers. They could connect to the Sirius server, you could connect to the Draco server. And that explains why the Draco Stonehenge is up north in the first place, is because Draco is always visible in the northern hemisphere. So it's the one internet connection point that would never go down.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's pretty, I guess, I had I don't know if I had to guess, I probably have enough for about 12 hours of talking. So I tried to pick the slides that I thought were most visually appealing for the audience and mix in some of my latest material and leave a little bit of time maybe for questions, or I guess we're already at the end.
Yeah, we've had questions coming in throughout the show and tried to address them as they come up.
Okay.
Wonderful show here this afternoon. Thank you very much for all this great info. I had no idea that the site even existed, and I myself am from Ontario, and I didn't know that this stuff was here, but I'm glad I know now. Now, for the viewers that may want to get a hold of you, and maybe ask you a question later on down the road when this video is being circulated, how can they get a hold of you and your email address, website,
Sure.
Facebook groups, or anything like that, your show?
Yeah, the best way to reach me is probably just on Facebook. Give me a shout on my author page. It's Leland Judson. But if you're really feeling ambitious, you could even try calling into 98.5 FM. We got a 1-800 number, so you can call in and ask your questions even live on the air.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Leland. This was a wonderful show. Really enjoyed this epic information here. Really interesting. I'm going to go back and rewatch it, and then go to Google Maps and see if I can start locating some of these places. It's going to be interesting. I suggest everyone that's in the audience do the same thing, because this is the type of information that you don't hear too often. All these discoveries are being made everywhere else in the world, except up here in Canada. And Canada has a lot to offer archaeologically and culturally from antiquity, because we had a rich Aboriginal culture here, which was quite advanced, and they knew things that we only wish that we knew today.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you having me on the show, Omar. And if you ever need another guest to talk about any of these subjects, just give me a shout anytime. I'll be
Bonus.
sure to make time for it. And just like to give a quick shout out to Kendra and thank her for telling me about your show.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, Agent K.
Yeah.
Is my name for her. She's fantastic. She's due to be back on the show here in a couple of days. Last time we talked about the near-death experience, and this time we're going to be talking about the same thing, but
Nice.
Develop a little deeper into the alien realm and dimensional realm and talk about that stuff. So that's going to be a great show. And of course, on March 20th, we have our all-day marathon webinar coming up. This is going to feature 7 speakers. This is going to be co-hosted with Clarence Mitchell from Closer Encounters. This is going to be a very interactive show. So I suggest follow the link and go and register with Zoom. And while you're in the crowd, you have a question for our speaker. We'll bring you right onto the screen so that you can ask the viewer the question yourself and get the answer directly from our presenters. So make sure that you guys register, share it, and become part of the show and be part of the movement of education. So with that being said, happy solstice, everyone. This is coming up in a couple of days.
Yeah.
And thank you very much to Leland for being on our show here. And thank you to everyone that watched our show, that's going to watch our show and shared our show. So thank you very much. My name is Omar. I was your host here this evening. Check out our site, watcherstalk.com. We also have an app that you can download. And also we've got a couple of tours coming up. The information will be releasing over the course of the next couple of days. We have a tour set up with Ildi Baudi that's going to be in November of this year in Egypt. And then, of course, we have Angkor Wat set up with Advanced Archaeology. That's going to be with Klaus Donna and John Shaughnessy and Michael Tallinger and Bruce Cunningham and myself and a few other people. So hopefully we'll see you there. And that's pretty much it, guys. So peace and love to everyone. Make sure tomorrow morning when you go buy a coffee, buy someone a coffee behind you and tell them to pass it forward. See how far that goes. That'll help you raise your vibration and your frequency, which will bring you happy, happy, joy, joy in your family, around you, in your workplace, and most especially in within you. So with much love here from Watchers Talk, thank you for joining us here this afternoon, and have a good afternoon. Bye.